Hi, everyone. In this section, we address the last big question that organizes our course. How can we fight and win with honor? To answer this question, we really need to start with a more fundamental question. When, if ever, is war morally permissible? War means killing other human beings. How can that ever be moral? In general, there have been three answers to the question, when is war morally permissible? The first answer is never. The pacifist response to war asks us, what part of thou shalt not kill don't you understand? Full stop. The second response rejects the question altogether. The realist tradition insists that war is neither moral nor immoral. It's amoral. It is an enterprise that exists outside the bounds of morality. Indeed, a realist would contend that applying the normal constraints of morality to war is itself immoral because that is likely to prolong conflict. General Sherman's famous quote is the realist bumper sticker for this. War is cruelty. There is no use trying to reform it. The crueler it is, the sooner it will be over. The third answer to the question, is war morally permissible, is sometimes. This is the just war tradition, and it's what we focus on in NE 203. Just war theorists attempt to stake out a moral middle ground between the pacifists and the realists. The tradition maintains that under certain very limited conditions, war is justified. Just war theory consists of two major parts. The first considers when it is justified for a state to go to war. And lawyers and philosophers refer to this by the Latin jus ad bellum. Classical just war theory, the theory that was laid out primarily by Thomas Aquinas, lists three conditions that have to be satisfied in order for a war to be morally justified. First, it must be declared by a legitimate authority. Typically, that means the head of state. Second, war must be fought for a just cause. This has come to mean almost exclusively self-defense or defense of another state that is the victim of aggression. The third criterion is that war must be fought with right intentions. It's not enough that a leader can cite a just cause for war. The intention has to be in concert with that cause. During the 1990 Gulf War, for example, the just cause was the defense of an ally, Kuwait. Our intention was to drive the Iraqi army out of Kuwait. Clearly, that is an example of a right intention. Many pundits, however, urged President Bush, that's the Bush the Elder, to exploit the opportunity to invade Iraq and depose Saddam Hussein. I'm not sure if Bush was thinking in these terms when he rejected this idea, but this would have been an excellent example in which the cause was just, but the right intention condition would not have been met. So those are the classic jus ad bellum conditions. Some just war theorists also include three additional conditions that must be met in order for a war to be considered just. So condition number 4 is last resort. War can be considered a moral option only if a state has exhausted nonviolent options like diplomacy. Fifth, there has to be a reasonable hope of success. Even if a state has a just cause for war, a state cannot just throw away the lives of its citizens if there's no way it's going to win. The sixth condition is proportionality. The anticipated harm that will result from a war should not exceed the benefits that the state hopes to gain. According to most just war theorists, the decision to go to war is the province of statecraft. Heads of state are held morally responsible for these decisions, not soldiers. So the jus ad bellum criteria might apply to our students when they become the president or the secretary of state, but not right when they graduate. They will, however, be held morally responsible for how they fight the wars that their leaders commit them to. And this introduces us to the second major part of the just war tradition, jus in bello. The jus in bello part of the just war tradition deals with the conduct of war, how much force may be used, and against whom. Just war theory provides three jus ad bellum principles. The first is proportionality. No act of war should cause more harm than it's intended to prevent. For example, if I know that a terrorist leader is in a specific building, it may be considered proportionate to target that building with precision munitions. If I know that he's in a particular city, it would be considered disproportionate use of force to level that entire city. It would also be indiscriminate, which brings us to the second jus in bello criterion, discrimination. A distinction must be made between combatants and non-combatants. A combatant is someone who is actively engaged in the business of war. A non-combatant is everyone else. Non-combatants may never be intentionally harmed or killed. While this may sound simple enough, in practice it can be extremely difficult. Discrimination isn't just a matter of not shooting civilians. It means that our students, when they are junior officers, will be asked to place the safety of non-combatants over the safety of their own troops sometimes. And then they'll have to explain this to their troops. Okay, the third principle is necessity. Necessity is so closely wrapped up with proportionality that some just war theorists don't include this in the jus in bello criteria. But I think it's an important reminder to every warrior. War isn't carte blanche to kill enemy combatants and break things at will. Any death and destruction on the battlefield must serve some military purpose. So why do we tie our hands with these constraints? If the war is just, why should we place limits on how we fight and who we kill, especially if our enemies are not playing by the same rules? There are many ways to answer these questions. I'll offer two. First, the ultimate goal of war is not to win. The ultimate goal of war is to establish a more just peace on the other side of war. How a nation fights will influence what that peace is going to look like. Second, it's precisely these constraints and nothing else, really, that distinguishes a warrior from a murderer. When our troops come home, we want them to come home as whole human beings. Observing these moral codes, the code of the warrior, increases the likelihood that will happen. There's a quote from Douglas MacArthur from the war crime tribunals after the Second World War that wraps up both of these ideas nicely. I'll read that. The soldier, be he friend or foe, is charged with the protection of the weak and unarmed. It is the very essence and reason for his being. When he violates this sacred trust, he not only profanes his entire cult, but threatens the very fabric of international society. Thank you.